Many fans here in this year.
Hello and welcome to FPO Round 1 Front 9 coverage from Sieravuori. It was one of the latest Euro Tour events of the season, played in beautiful Sieravuori. It's a less known place, not a very famous course, but a beautiful one. My name is Elias, Luukkonen, and I will be taking you through this Round 1 Front 9. As we take a look at the players, somebody I know pretty well, Anni Mäkelä. He's a local, has trained a lot on this particular course. He's got a very smooth backhand, not much of a forehand player. And here's a player that's very familiar to all of us throughout the season, Jenni Karppinen. She's been playing great throughout the entire season. Definitely has a strong suited game for this course. And another new name here, Mirabella Meltaus. It's actually somebody that I remember when I started playing disc golf. Somebody you would see in weekly events often, and great to see her making it on this big stage. And here from Sweden, Elina Rydberg representing the international part of this card. It's great to see all the way from Sweden. One of the most talented Swedish FPO players. And we're starting the round on a pretty difficult long hole. It's not difficult as far as accuracy, as the fairway is quite wide. You probably have 30 meters of width between the two OB lines on the left and right. But the length 234 meters, very far for being a par 4. Not a hole that's birdied very often, and par is gonna be just a great start on this one. As we approach the green, you really want to stay on the fairway for the first 2 shots, and then at the end, take that right-hand hyzer. Still pretty early on the day. You can see the fog coming off the ground as Anni Mäkelä is starting, and the fog making camera work extremely difficult on this early morning. But looks like Anni, while she faded out a little bit left, gonna be still on the fairway. And Jenni here challenging the other side, right side of the fairway, needs to fade back. And couldn't quite see that one. Mirabella surprisingly going with a standstill. It looks like she got plenty of power even with no run-up. That's gonna be something to keep an eye on throughout the rest of the round. Will she take a standstill on each of the tee pads? Or only on the first one? Possibly because of some nerves. You can really never know what's going on inside a player's head. But especially on this big stage, you know, you have some pressure. As we saw Elina throwing a good drive. And Mirabella here again with a standstill. That's just a fine shot. Didn't see an OB graphic, but I believe Jenni did end up going OB on the right side, so this would be her 3rd shot. Well in bounds there, and possibly still a chance to get up and down for the bogey 5. As everybody's kind of just making their way down the fairway, I feel like that's the common theme on this one. It's really not about getting those huge drives, but rather just chipping down the distance. And unfortunately, it looks like Elina not quite able to do that. she's gonna find the OB on the left side, and the score is gonna add up pretty quickly once you start doing that. While Mirabella going with another powerful looking standstill, and she actually does have a pot at the basket from there. And this one is risky. Elina going all the way over the OB, but what a perfect shot, just perfectly in the circle. That's exactly what you'd like. Really well on this hole, the first 2 shots are important to stay in bounds, and a couple of our players failing to do that. I would still argue that the 3rd shot here, or whichever shot it is, depending if you go OB or not, is the most important. As the green is somewhat protected, you have to get around all of these medium-sized birch trees, as Jenni is able to do that pretty well. Just a short putt, that's going to be a bit of a nerve tester at the start of this round. Mirabella with a respectable offer. Let's see if Anni can make this hyzer putt from outside the circle. Not quite. I know she's quite comfortable with that hyzer release. That's what she usually goes with, even on the regular ones. No wind on this early morning start, and Jenni's gonna start off with a bogey 5. Really not a bad score. As I mentioned earlier, the par is kind of ideal in getting the bogeys. Really not that bad. And I could argue that the statistics also agree with me, as this was the most difficult hole on the course, averaging full 2 strokes above par. So a crazy difficult average. Hole 2 playing a lot easier though. Still has the 5th most difficult one. There's 97 meters. Relatively tight. You really have to throw this straight. Not a low shot, but you can't really take the highest of gaps here, as there are some of those branches going above the gap. So really just need to hammer something straight and hopefully stay straight. There's a bit of a slope on each side of the basket, so speed control and control of that overstable finish is quite important here. And it looks like Jenni's got plenty of control, but the 97 meters playing a little bit long with the slightest, possibly a couple of meters of uphill grade at the end. So she's gonna be on the edge of the circle. And Elina also with a nice line, kind of challenging those branches I mentioned earlier. That's also gonna be just fine. A couple of difficult putts for the birdie. And Anni there getting some local love. I believe going with that star strike. And Mirabella is actually continuing to go with a standstill. I would have to guess that's a strongest part of her game, and that's why she's doing it. And also it looks like she's not really missing a lot of distance. The velocity coming off the hand is pretty good, even with a standstill. As Anni, where is she throwing? That's completely to the other side of the fairway. And gonna be a likely bogey to follow up that double on hole 1. I would really love to see a birdie here. Let's see how aggressive Elina gets. Not really. Just putting it under the basket for the par. Now the ball is on Jenni's court. Much more open look. Just the slightest slope, as I mentioned earlier, behind the basket. Enough to make her lay up from that 12-meter range. And even Anni, she's gonna have to swallow a pretty difficult start. Oh no! That's a tough miss from just outside the bullseye there. Not really something you love to see, but as I mentioned on hole 1, nerves probably coming into play. I don't remember Mirabella being on the feature card or lead card on any of the Euro Tour events prior to this one, so I think some nerves are very much forgivable. As we're moving on to another par 4, this time much shorter than hole 1. Hole 3, 176 meters. It's a bit of a dog leg, not a very severe one. You have to, on your first shot, you really want to stay as straight as possible, get as far as possible to hopefully give yourself a look around the corner towards the right bending part of the fairway. Basket is way up here to the right. But really, as it's not an incredibly long hole, once again here you just want to take a lot of that distance off on the first one and then hopefully have a good enough of an angle to approach the green. You see those those 3 birch trees in the middle of the fairway. They're a very good aiming point. If you land anywhere near them, you're gonna have a nice angle. And they're kind of fading out to the left, but as long as you don't fade all the way to the left side OB, you're gonna have a better angle to the green once again. And that's right on the edge for Elina. But looks like she did stay safe, and while she's in the ditch there, so the footing's gonna be difficult. Looks like the angle is pretty good. Same thing for Anni there. Not quite getting a lot of distance, but she's gonna have a nice gap, nice angle to approach, at least towards the basket. And once again, that's a nice standstill throw. Outdriving everybody on the group, but that's unfortunately bounced to the left side OB. I feel like this is an interesting event compared to a lot of the Euro Tour events because the field is slightly smaller. We only have 8 players in the FPO field, and I believe also the MPO field wasn't completely full. And this course is kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's not really big cities near, so it's almost like you have this nature vacation where there's not a lot of distractions. As we have seen a couple of shots down the fairway, and Elina trying to put it a little bit closer to the basket. She's gonna have a long circle 2 look. And Mirabella going with another standstill. I suspect this is going to be the theme for the entire round. But unfortunately for her, looks like she will likely have to settle for bogey, as her 4th shot will be thrown from over 20 meters away. And Jenni also leaving quite a lot of meat on the bone there. Not the approach she was looking for. Let's see if Anni can fix on that. She usually has pretty good touch with those standstill approaches. And once again, pretty good touch as far as distance control, but missing the line a little bit. feel like it's a pretty rare course compared to a lot of courses in Finland, as you have a lot of green, lush grass, and a lot of open space. We'll get to the woods later on in the round, but for now I'm really enjoying the view of just green grass. It's not something we get very often in Finland. This is a pretty big putt for Jenni. Hopefully get some momentum on the putting green. That's just not it. A bit of an early morning putt there, pulling it to the right. And Anni with the same thing. Looks like the morning is early for everybody. Or honestly, probably they were just bad putts. I feel like there's a lot of talk sometimes about commentators being not honest enough. I feel like a lot of commentators have the tendency to make excuses about why players are throwing bad shots. But a lot of the times there's really no explanation. It's just a bad shot. And nice to see still Jenni cleaning up that unfortunate double bogey. Not really what you wanted on this hole. And bogey also for Anni. She will really have to get this round started pretty soon. And that one stays in just barely. You can see the unique basket colors. It's actually a disc catcher still. Or I'm not actually sure whether it's Innova or Discmania, but disc catcher is the name of the basket. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that. Many people consider it to be the golden standard of baskets. Some people think that other baskets are better. If you guys are willing to, please comment your favorite basket under the video. We can have a bit of a comparison. As we're moving on to the woods a little bit. Hole 4 here, you have that early gap off the tee, and then you have a lot of open space. You really want to throw something pretty straight with a slight left finish. It's a pretty long hole to reach, so we're looking for that circle's edge, maybe circle 2 type of look with a good shot. And that's kind of what Elina was able to do there. You know, she's not really inside circle 1, and she might have a couple of obstructions there, but still gonna be a look for the basket. And similar thing for Anni, just a little bit further back. I believe she was going with that star shrike once again. That's a powerful standstill once again. Kind of missing the line, unfortunately, but I feel like the theme of this course is that depending on the hole, the thickness of the rough might vary a lot. So depending on the hole, for example, on this one, the rough is not very thick. And on some of the later holes, as we get into the woods more, there are particular parts of the holes that are actually incredibly rough. But as you can see here, not the toughest up and down here, Anni. Only 30 meters left. And she's going with that standstill. That's well done there. And similar thing for Mirabella on the other side. Just fine there. This hole is averaging very close to par. Averaging with that 3.14. And Jenni here trying to pull that down. Unfortunately, not quite cashing it in. Very respectable run though. And Elina Just a 6-meter putt left for the par. A large percent of the field was getting a par on this one. There was actually only one bogey in the entire field. And by entire field, of course, I mean the 8 players that were playing in this event. Let's just hope it wasn't Mirabella. No, good cleanup there. Getting the first par of her round. And Anni here trying to do the same.
The Wombat 3 pretty much goes right where you want to throw it. One of the most difficult shots to throw in disc golf is a perfectly straight shot. And the Wombat 3 does that really, really well.
And hole 5 here. This is one of the more difficult birdies on tour. Doesn't really matter if it's FPO or MPO. Even on the MPO side there were quite few birdies on this one. And in FPO this is playing as pretty much a par 4. Even though it's stated as a par 3. It looks like on this course they are playing or the organizers have decided to not make a different FPO layout, which is fine. I know many FPO players that actually prefer to play the more difficult MPO layout. Of course, the scores being more positive that way. But this is a par hole. This is really not a hole any of these players are trying to birdie. And looks like par is out of the question for Elina already, as she has gone to the right side OB. And Anni here with a much better line. Once again going with that star strike. That's a good shot there. This once again kind of like a couple of holes we've already played. It's a very wide fairway. The OB on the right side, as we saw, can come into play. But really no reason to challenge that at all. So much room on that wide grassy field. And really on this one it's more about the approach. You have that tennis court on the short left side. So if you go over the fence of the tennis court and into the tennis court, then you're gonna be finding yourself in the OB. That's from Elina, that's a nice play to stay inbounds, though she has a really long putt for the bogey and likely will have to settle for a double. And Mirabella there, barely in the circle, but not really ideal. As I mentioned, that tennis court, you would like to be rather on the safe side. Go wider to the right, not really even challenge the court. As probably should have said that a little bit earlier, as Anni has also hit the court. Let's see if Jenni can make the correction here. Just gotta put it out there pretty wide to the right. This lush, thick grass is really not gonna skip that much. As we saw, just a small skip there. She's gonna have an edge of the circle look for par. Elina there, she's gonna have a double bogey unfortunately. Anni here with a run from outside the circle. Good one. Very good looking release. Now it's down to Jenni or Mirabella to get that par on the card. This hole was averaging at a 3.71 as Jenni also misses it low there. Not as high of an average as it could have been, for example, compared to hole 1, which was averaging 2 strokes above par. That's a great putt, possibly contributing to that lower average. But yeah, as I was saying, for example, compared to hole 1, which is a very difficult par 4, that was averaging 2 strokes above par. And this one being a very difficult par 3, but only averaging 0.7 strokes above par. You have to wonder whether it's the nerves at the start of the round on hole 1 or whether the extra distance makes it just so much more difficult, even compared to the par. But here's a hole that's a little bit shorter, hole 6, just 104 meters. There's a couple of gaps on this one that you can choose. A lot of players taking this route the drone is flying, the right side, hyzer. You can really play it as a hyzer or a flat to hyzer at the end, depending how hard and how overstable you want to go. And if you're not comfortable with that right side gap, there's also the option of going left, so more of a straight to slightly right turning shot on that left side. But Mirabella clearly firing for that right side gap, just not getting it far enough right. And that's possibly gonna be a pretty tough scramble. And Anni there hitting the line much more clean. That's a good shot, kind of just outside of circle 2 there. And Jenni with the best look so far, just 15 meters away with an open putt. Looks like right side gap is the choice for everybody. As I would have expected, it's really a much more natural line for the right-handed players compared to that straight to right finishing left side gap. A couple of scrambles here. We saw Mirabella going inside the circle on top of the hill, and Elina there on the other side. And Anni just putting it on the edge of bullseye. Should be an easy par, and let's see if she can make it here. Not quite. She's very confused. Possibly she's played enough that she for sure knew that that was not going in, but possibly just confused of that right side release that she's had a couple of. As we saw a nice putt there from Mirabella. This hole actually, interestingly enough, was playing perfectly at even par average. There was one birdie and a one bogey on the field. Shout out to Jenni Kateiskonen for getting that solo birdie of the round. But it's just tough to get that finish right all the way at the end of the flight with that 113 meters of distance. And Jenni, that's a really nice shot. Still gonna be about 20 meters short. So once again, this is a hole that you're really fine with the par. The rough is not too thick, especially on the right side. If you go left, then it can be a bit more thick. But really just any of these players are still very much in position to get a par. As we see Anni throwing a beautiful approach. And Elina going over the top. Nice shot. Perfect control there. And Mirabella with a bit of a late release there. Still gonna be very much okay. And Jenni, once again a right side miss. It almost feels like it's gonna be the theme of the round, or at least so far it has been. And that's gonna be a bogey for Mirabella. Everybody else pretty much set for the par. Yep, and that's actually going to be the only bogey of the day on this one. Everybody else on the field getting a par. I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself on a lot of the holes on that, you know, everybody but a couple of people getting the par. That's really what happens when you have this kind of difficult course with a lot of distance. You know, the course, I feel like the course suits the MPO field very well, but for FPO, as we have seen so far, it really produces a lot of pars and a lot of those short approaches. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on this course for future events on the FPO field. But we're moving on to a shorter one here, 90 meters, slight left bend at the end. You have a couple of tight gaps at the beginning to hit. But this is a pretty natural shape here. You don't have to throw it super hard, as we see Anni going with a mid-range there. Not quite hitting the gap at the end. But you really want to hammer something straight with that left finish. This is looking perfect. What a nice shot from Jenni. She's gonna be inside the circle, and that's really what you want here. This one also looking very nice from Elina. Perfect! In the bullseye. That's a guaranteed birdie, and looks like we're gonna have at least one, probably two birdies on the card on this very same hole, even though we haven't had a single one yet throughout the round. Or possibly even more. Anni there with the outside look, and Mirabella also with a very potential spot, a little bit obstructed there. Jenni here, this is one she'd like to pick up, but once again it's that right side miss. Can be really tough to get out of that when you're missing on the same side. You know, I can tell from both personal experience and seeing other players throughout my competitive years having the same miss throughout the round. It's easy to overcorrect. Man, I know even players from the event are pretty confused. You really want to throw something straight with possibly a slight left finish. If you want to be aggressive and cut the corner, you can finish left, but both of those shots that finished up on the right side are good because they open up the angle more towards the next curve. For example, compared to this, Jenni does have a shorter second shot if she'd like to go for the basket, but the angle from the left side is a bit tougher. And that's a great drive. Mirabella got all the way around the corner. Yeah, that's just a common see on this one. It's really tight. You have a lot of small gaps to hit, as we see Anni here. Just look at all the trees on the fairway. It's super difficult to get clean. Really kind of everybody besides Elina is still in position for at least a par. And even with Jenni going down on that left side, she still has a look to the basket on the next shot. And if you guys are confused, don't worry. It's a tough hole, and you know, it's also a hole that's going to be very interesting to see how it develops in the future. I feel like it has a lot more potential than what it's showing right now. And as I mentioned earlier, Jenni there just able to pitch it up under the basket. And this is Elina for par. She's gonna have to settle for the bogey. And Mirabella trying to float it in even. This hole was creating a lot more separation than some of the other ones, averaging with an over 5 average. And interestingly enough, every par that was carded on this hole was carded by one of our card mates. So the 3 pars on the hole being Jenni, Anni and Mirabella. And as we look at the top 10, our card mates are doing pretty strong compared to the rest of the field. Everybody in top 4, and that +4, +5 pace looking to be what you need to stay on the lead card for round 2. Thank you guys for watching. We're gonna have more wooded holes on the back nine and also some open ones at the end. Some beautiful scenery. Hope to see you guys there.